Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio, and today we're going to talk about liking. Yes, we all want to be liked. So, liking is important when it comes to selling. People buy from people they like. And it's not just that. I mean, you've heard that many times, right? People buy from people they like. That's part of the equation. You still have to offer value and present a good product or service and prove that you can deliver on those needs. But let's get back to liking, because you can have a great product, you can have a great service, but maybe somebody just doesn't like you. And they don't know why. Have you ever met somebody and you say, I don't like this person, but I don't know why? Come on, be honest. You know that's happened to you, because it's happened to me. You meet somebody for the first time and goes, I don't like you, but I don't know why. I can't explain it to myself. Well, something about that person triggered something in your brain that says, I don't like this person. And it could have been that maybe you dealt with somebody that was like that person in a past life and they reminded you of that person. But I want to talk about liking because, again, you can have the best product or service, but if the person doesn't like you, the company doesn't like you, they may choose to go with somebody else who's maybe just as good. So Albert Mehrabian came up with this equation. You've probably heard this equation many times, but it fits in the context of liking. That's how he meant it to be done or used. And the formula is something like this. I'm going to give you the general formula, then we're going to talk about it. Albert Mehrabian basically said, to determine whether I like you or not, 55% of my judgment of whether I like you or not is visual. 38% is verbal, what I say. And only 7%, here was the shocker, only 7% was actual content, what you actually said. Now let me say these numbers again. These are fascinating numbers when it comes to whether somebody likes you or not. 55% is visual, what they see. 38% is what they hear coming out of your mouth. But only 7% is the actual content. So in other words, 55% visual, 38% verbal, and only 7% content. Now let's break these numbers up. And how does this apply to selling? Well, think about it. If we can figure out how to get people to like us, they're more likely to buy from us. So let's go through Albert Mehrabian's numbers. Very slowly, let's really dig into them. 55% of whether I like you or not is determined by visual. Now, what does he mean by visual? Well, let's kind of walk through it. It could be facial expressions. You ever see somebody have a certain facial expression? You're like, what's wrong with that person? Or it could be body language. In other words, anything I see. Basically, I'm starting to make some determination. Now, this formula should prove to you once and for all that we do, listen carefully, we do judge a book by its cover. We make judgments based on what we see. And if you use Albert Mehrabian's number, 55% of whether I like you or not is based on what I see. Now, why is this important? Because if you're showing up to a meeting for the first time, to meet the client for the first time, you better be dressed appropriately. Because they're going to look at how you're dressed. I mean, they're not going to study you up and down from head to toe, but they'll notice if you're not dressed appropriately. I work with a lot of companies who come to somebody's houses, right? A pest control company is one of my favorite companies. They come to your house, but they figured out that when they show up, they have the basic white shirt, the red logo on the shirt, black pants, and they always look professional. And they're groomed. Now, let me emphasize this. They're groomed. In other words, they have their hair combed, or in my case, I have no hair, so I have my head shine. That was a joke. But basically, your appearance does matter. How you dress, how you look, always matters. I know some companies who go down to the detail when they even, as they're presenting, they know that the customer sees their hands, for example, on an iPad. So they require their salespeople to get a manicure so that their nails look really nice when they're presenting something to the customers. Again, because the customer will notice these things. Also on the visual side is body language. Body language is so important. Believe it or not, you can actually tell a lot about what's going on in a person's mind if you know how to read their body language. The importance of body language tells you, are they interested, leaning forward? Are they not interested? Leaning back? Are they confrontational? Arms crossed and kind of looking a little angry. In other words, when we say things to a customer, it may trigger a certain response in their facial expression or body language. So again, all this matters. Even, again, the facial cues are always key to me. I like to study a person's face when I talk to them. I want to see changes. When I say something, do I notice the slightest change? Last but not least, gestures. How do you use your hands when you're describing things? I use my hands a lot when I describe things. That's what people have told me. And the video proves it. I love to use my hand because I think using your hands to describe things, hand gestures, and especially if your hand gestures are in tune with what you're saying, they're working together, it makes the message more powerful. So 55% of whether I like you or not, according to Albert Mehrabian, is based on what I see. So we do judge a book by its cover. 38%, next category, is basically verbal. In other words, the tone of your voice. This is so key. Your voice is one of the most powerful selling instruments you have, probably second only to your brain. What you say, how you say it, really matters. I remember the late, great Zig Ziglar had this great joke, and he says, I can give a sentence 6 different meanings depending on how I say it. He said, for example, I did not shoot that dog. That's a plain statement. I did not shoot that dog. Right? He says, watch me change the meaning of that sentence several ways by how I pronounce the sentence. I did not shoot that dog. In other words, I didn't shoot it, somebody else did. Or, I did not shoot that dog. That's a denial. I did not, right? I did not shoot that dog. I threw a rock at it, but I didn't shoot it. That's what that meant, right? I did not shoot that dog. I shot the other one. I did not shoot that dog? Question mark. I don't think it was a dog. Do you see how changing the intonation, the inflection, the accent, how hard I hit a word changes the meaning of a sentence? Most salespeople really aren't aware of this. Have you ever asked a salesperson a question and then there's that small that's something we can do. And as soon as you hear that, that's something we can do, immediately it triggers a part of your brain to say they don't know what they're talking about. So your tone always has to be authoritative in a way that comes across as polite, not rude, but authoritative in the sense that you know what you're talking about. You are the domain expert in your field. You are the subject matter expert. You know what you need to say, what's right, what's wrong. I'm not talking about being arrogant. I'm talking about being confident. There's a fine line. But every time you hesitate, you pause. When somebody asks you a question, you're like, these little things, this is the verbal content, right? The verbal tones, rather, that Mehrabian is talking about. So again, 55% is visual. Whether I like you or not is based on my visual of you. What am I seeing? 38% is tone, voice. Even speed matters. Adjusting your speed to the other person is great. Look, I used to live in Miami, and down there, they talk really fast, really, really, really fast. But now I live in Georgia, and things are just a little slower, if you know what I mean. But because adjusting your speed to the customer's speed creates this synchronicity. You get in sync with the customer. In fact, using that speed allows you to really communicate at their level. Last part, 7% is actual content, the words you're actually saying. That's amazing. 55% is visual, 38% is, I'll just say, auditory, audio, what you hear, but only 7% is the actual content. In other words, people are paying attention to what you're saying, but they're really listening to more your tone, and they're looking at you visually. So what you say matters. What you say matters, but what's more important is how you say it, the tone. But also, when you're expressing yourself through visuals, through gestures, it's how you're saying it. So keep this in mind. This is really important. When it comes to selling, your ability to get the customer to like you is important. Remember, 55% visual, what they see. 38% is what they hear. And only 7% is actual content. All three matter. I am not trying to minimize the content piece. But if you can tie it together with the visual, How you say it, the speed, the volume, how you say it with that control will determine whether a customer is going to like you and maybe even buy from you. This is Victor Antonio signing off right now. We will talk to you on next week's podcast. So thank you again for listening to the Sales Influence Podcast. Don't forget to leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, remember, check out my sales training website, seminarsonselling.com, where you'll find great training videos for you or your team to help your business grow. Lastly, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Ha ha! Take care.
Every manager can feel it. The difference between a motivated, value-driven sales team and one that's stuck in a rut. CEOs know the difference too. They can see it clearly in the profit and loss columns. The question is, how do you get your team to this elite level? Is there something extra you can do to break through the remaining resistance and equip them with the right mindset to grow your business? Yes, there is. But you're not going to do it with one of those cheesy inspirational speakers or some self-proclaimed guru. What you need is someone with a real business track record to deliver key insights in a captivating way, to give your team the right tools for selling in today's tough marketplace. Enter Victor Antonio, experienced executive, innovative thinker, compelling speaker. He's ready to deliver the message you need your people to hear. Not with a canned speech, but a customized, dynamic keynote designed to deliver results. Bring Victor Antonio to your next event before the competition does.